Cloud. Okay. We are off to the races. Hi, everybody. This is Michael Anderson with Etail Solutions. Thanks for joining us today for our second episode of D2C LeadershipNow. I believe you should be able to see my screen here. We've got a couple of just quick housekeeping items before we get to our guest for the day. First of all, we have the chat function here with Zoom Webinar. If you have questions as we're going through this thing and really want to kind of get your question out there for either our guest or myself to address, please use that chat function. We might not necessarily stop midstream to address it, but we'll try and get to the questions at some point during the discussion. We are going to keep this fairly informal. This is really just about a couple of people talking about challenges and tips and tricks and things that we've learned in the industry. And today we've got a very specific focus around IT. So use that. All participants are going to be muted for everybody's benefit. Just wanted to point out before we get started, next month, we've got a friend of mine who I've known for, I guess I'm not really sure when you say several or many where that breaking point is, but it's somewhere in there for many years. Steve is a very, very knowledgeable guy as it relates to fulfillment overall. He's worked for a number of fairly large organizations and has been in the logistics industry for quite some time. And so we're going to discuss how successful D2C brands expand fulfillment without losing control. That last component is a really important one to kind of keep in mind. So that will be August 9th is when we're going to do that. Also a Tuesday, and that again is going to be 1 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to join us for that. So with that said, let me introduce our guests here for today. We are going to be joined by Chip from Evenflo, and Chip is the Vice President of Information Technology. I'm going to go ahead and enable here. We're asked to start video. Chip and I have known each other for, what is it, a couple of years, 3 years, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yes.
And have had the opportunity to have a lot of deep discussions around a number of these different topics. So Chip, maybe as a starting point, maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself, kind of how you came to Evenflo, and then we'll start diving into some topics.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Michael. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk with the group. I'm an Ohio boy. I grew up in Northeastern Ohio and graduated from Ohio State. And I've been in the industry about 30 years. And long stay here at Evenflo, almost 20 years at Evenflo. And we've been through a variety of different ownerships. Back in the day, many private equity ownerships over the years, and then several years ago we were acquired by Goodbaby International, which is a Hong Kong based company, and we've worked with them from a company integration perspective, and we have an interesting and challenging industry, not necessarily the greatest of margins, and we work with Walmart, Target, and Amazon from a retailer perspective. And of course, we are also, trying to mold ourselves into a retailer ourselves, as our e-com world is becoming basically our focus from a growth perspective. But I've been here quite a long time and seen a lot of different things. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you say quite a long time. I think you said 20 years.
Right.
Just to kind of give us context as to like the details and the stuff that you have learned over the years and so forth. Can you kind of walk us through, like, how did you get your start at Evenflo? What was your position, and what are some different roles that you've held there?
Yeah, my career has been focused typically more in ERP and business applications in general. Earlier in my career, probably typically more focused traditionally with working with the back office and efficiencies and trying to leverage technology to improve, automate those areas. Lately, over the last probably 5 to 10 years, a lot more commercially focused with the front of the office. But typically I was been involved in many ERP implementations, many warehouse management systems, implementations, and now delving a lot more into the world of commerce, e-commerce, order management, inventory management, and things like that.
So sounds like pretty heavy transactional background in terms of having to make different systems of record kind of talk to each other, make sure that things are flowing and so forth.
Yeah, we are a pretty focused group on system integration. Although we have a core ERP system, we also have a WMS and many point solutions, best in breed type point solutions. So system integration of those transactions is an important focus for us.
Awesome. So, obviously Evenflo is a name a lot of us recognize, especially those of us with kids. I've got twins who actually just got their driver's permits. I took them driving for the very first time last night. A little scary, I got to say. But, actually, they did great. But so we've had over the years, we had just tons of Evenflo products around our house. So it's a name that I was excited to be introduced to when we first met. You have gone through traditional distribution, right? And that's kind of how most of us probably came to know Evenflo in terms of the name.
Right.
But you've made some decisions here over the last few years that you wanted to go direct to consumer.
Correct.
So can you talk a little bit about kind of the evolution of going from being a brand to a brand through traditional distribution to, like, when did you start to think about, hey, we have to figure out this D2C thing?
Right. So great question. I think, and when you say D2C, I try to talk both about D2C from a direct to consumer, from a selling perspective, either on our website or our marketplaces.
Yeah. So I think let me clarify. Let me clarify for the group here. When we're talking D2C, we're generally talking about sort of the shift from pallets to eaches and interacting with consumers directly in a way that they're going to order a product. Could be a marketplace, could be a retail partnership with somebody like a Target or whatever, or it could be your own website or one of your many websites.
Right, and and our first, I guess, entry into those types of channels were probably more, or definitely more, on our what traditionally is called DSV, or drop ship to retailers.
Yes, yep, drop ship vendor, yep.
As absolutely in the first portions of my career at Evenflo, and probably many of the others on the line, we were a brand, we were a manufacturer, and we let the retailers be the retailers, and we shipped bulk shipments, whether it be full truckloads or LTL shipments, bulk picking. Our systems were designed, and our processes were designed to do that and do that well, and they did. However, that mode is obviously one. The retailers obviously take a big chunk of those margins, and it became obvious that there was a progression towards us to start take more risk of the inventory, i.e. we would keep the inventory in our warehouses, and when a consumer placed an order on a Babies R Us website or an Amazon or a Walmart, we needed to be able to drop ship to that consumer. And we did so, but I wouldn't say we did so efficiently or extremely well initially. And but we did get up and running, and we grew those channels, those dropship channels, significantly, but it was still a pretty small percentage of our income. Of course, we started to sell directly on our website at some point during that journey. Historically, that was always looked at previously as a no-no. We don't want to compete with our own customers. Yeah. I remember back in the day, many CEOs and many CMOs coming through Evenflo basically saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to guide the consumer to our partner, our retail partners, and we're only going to do that. And at some point that mind shift changed, and we started to sell directly to the consumer. But again, it wasn't an area of focus for us, and it wasn't an area targeted from a strategic standpoint for growth.
Yeah.
But it started to become that, over the last decade.
So we run into and actually have this discussion on a really frequent basis. So I'm kind of glad you brought it up. A lot of times when there's a brand that's well known, in your case, globally recognized, has gone through traditional distribution. One of the big questions that we get on the front end of this is, oh, my board or my executives or whatever, they're telling me we have to go direct to consumer, but we're just really kind of scared about the channel conflict. Right. So how can you talk a little bit more? I know it's not, I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent from our discussion
Sure.
here, but you've got a lot of knowledge on this. So how did you guys decide to kind of look at this issue of channel conflict and kind of make peace with that?
Yeah, I think it probably was in a multitude of ways. One of the things we were able to do is offer some of our big box retailers and specifically the big boys, i.e. Walmart and Target initially, but and Babies R Us, exclusivity on certain either SKUs, fashions, those types of things. So some of it was strategic from a marketing perspective and exclusivity perspective. And then we might tweak a SKU in regards to certain fashions, in regards to certain options, certain trim levels, to sell it on our website. Another thing we did is, we traditionally have had long lead time manufacturing going on in China with, long lead time in transits. And historically, again, the retailer back in the day, would have an annual line review where you're basically bidding for space on their shelves, again, in store. And so we would have to take risks as far as inventory goes. Well, some of those risks did not pay off as far as getting a shelf placement. And then we would have inventory that we needed to do something with. And some of those SKUs were targeted for e-commerce, maybe more than the SKUs that were actually on the shelves at retailers. So those are a couple of things that I can kind of remember.
That's really interesting. So it was sort of some SKU customization, but then also became a way for you to be able to start maybe moving some inventory that had been sitting around too long for whatever reason. You mentioned a couple, but so it almost became sort of I wouldn't call it a liquidation, but it's an offshoot to be able to get rid of a bunch of eaches if you need to.
Correct. The other thing I can think of would be an ability to almost convince a retailer that this product and this product line or this particular car seat or stroller is a winner with the consumer. I.e., maybe it didn't make the short list with the retailer, but they didn't want to take the risk with the inventory in their distribution centers. Mm-hmm. But they would put it on their website, or we would put it on our website, and it would do well. And it would be a show them tool that, yes, this product is a winner. It's selling at this price, and it's a good. It's doing well in the e-commerce lane. It could do well in your store or in your warehouse.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess maybe bringing the conversation back in, so into the IT thread.
Sure.
So you made the decision, right? For any number of reasons, you're going direct, and I would say that that's fairly accepted nowadays as a very viable path for brands and manufacturers. And you started to experience some volume. You used some tools to kind of help solve the initial problems. But then at some point in time, you started to achieve a little bit of scale with this.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about sort of where you started to feel some of the bottlenecks from an IT perspective? Like you're experiencing success, right? So that's a good thing.
Right.
And walking before you run is always a good thing. But then like at a certain point in time, you start to feel maybe the wheels are wobbling a little bit. And what were some of those symptoms that you started to notice?
Yeah, there were a couple come to mind, Michael. One was, I would just call it, we talked about system integration. Okay. So there's always an e-commerce system. Right now we're running Shopify on our website. We traditionally are a heavy EDI shop. We have internal EDI expertise. We have an EDI system. We don't outsource all of our EDI work. It's pretty much in-house, although we staff aug that. You're pretty much going to have, whether it be 20 minutes or an hour and a half of delay on orders coming in from the internet, getting those visible into our ERP system to show up from a demand perspective and ability to get those to the ship points in the warehouse. So that is always a concern and was always a thorn in our side to some degree, because one, you have out in the e-commerce world, you have buyer's remorse. And there wasn't always a singular system to be dealt with. In the world of DSV, we partnered with companies like Commerce Hub, and orders would come from a retailer website through Commerce Hub and then to us, and that added an additional delay. So whenever you have an order that is not instantaneous, and it really never is, that always creates some risk, some problems, and some confusion for the business users. You could have an order that gets canceled in one system and does get canceled in one system, not in the other, and confusion, or an order that ships, but guess what? It's been canceled from a retailer perspective, so you're not going to get paid for that. So those delays were always a challenge with us, and we're on a legacy ERP system. And there's only so much we can do to expedite those. We did improve that throughout the years and create better architectures and better robustness. But besides delays, you have a error handling or master data issues that could cause an order to kick out into an exception queue, so on and so forth. So all of that system integration, delay, order in one place but not in the other, was a thorn in our side. And then just sheer volume, as the onesie twosie nature of e-commerce and direct to consumer is a lot different than shipping a truckload with 800 units on it. So just the pure noise in the system that causes bogs us down from a processing perspective, not only on the order ingestion, but on the all the way through the financial systems, including things as simple as we had a 6-digit order number in our core ERP system. And we would cycle through those 6-digit order numbers pretty fast, and got to the point where we were archiving almost annually in our core ERP domestic company. So we dealt with things like that. And so we needed to look for some other options.
Okay. So the first thing that you, by the way, I just got a comment. There's a question on people seeing Chip's video. Can somebody just pipe in if you're able to see Chip and just validate one way or the other? Thank you. So I can see you, Chip. So I don't know if it's one individual or not. But,
Gotcha.
So the first thing you mentioned, we have a term for that. We call that cycle times between systems, right?
Right.
And so to just kind of rehash that a little bit. Okay, good. I'm getting a thumbs up from some other folks. We're good to go. You've got a demand channel, right? It could be a Walmart, it could be Amazon, it could be a website, whatever that is. You've got then potentially some of the, if it's EDI, then some of the common players. So it could be the commerce hubs, the SPSs, the true commerces, the logic brokers of the world, right? And then you've got your systems internally. As you mentioned, it's a legacy ERP. And as you crank volume through that, everything gets amplified, right?
Absolutely.
So the problems get amplified. You can manage them manually when you're dealing with lower volume, but then as volume as volume increases, then the wobble gets worse, right?
Right.
So from a cycle time perspective, I think something that would be, if you're able to share, would be really helpful maybe for the attendees to understand is what sort of a cycle time were you experiencing? Like what was that delay? And then what were the different areas of the business that were impacted as a result of that?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, let me test my memory banks just a bit here, but let's just let's start with the website order on our own website. We intentionally put a 45-minute delay, a buyer's remorse type of delay, right from the get-go, as far as from the website to downstream systems.
And just to give them the ability, if they're going to stop an order, it's still only in one place.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and we still, even in today's world, with our Etail implementation, we decided to keep that buyer's remorse period, because it's in our discussions with the Etail folks and their experiences, that is to some degree a best practice type of mindset, and it saves a lot of headaches down the road, because you always have, whether it be a true buyer's remorse, or maybe they bought the wrong color, or maybe they bought two instead of one, or they put in the wrong address. All of those different types of things motivated us to keep that buyer's remorse period back in the day. But to some degree, it's a double-edged sword, because it's allowing for that keep the order in one place mindset to tweak, cancel, or change the order, but it's also not giving visibility to the rest of the business right away.
Yeah, so you're dealing with that order that may have happened. You're dealing with the potential that inventory could disappear between the time when that order was placed and when the system actually receives it, in order to allocate that inventory against the order, right?
Especially when you have potentially 15, if you're selling that same product on 15 to 20 different retailer websites.
Yeah.
And you're transmitting inventory again with these cycle delays. We're communicating inventory via EDI transactions to all of our retailers, and they have their own delays. We might only, typically our EDI schedule in general is every 4 hours. And so we'll communicate EDI or inventory availability every 4 hours, but maybe that Walmart website or that smaller retailer website is really only going to consume those EDI messages and ingest them maybe once a day. So overselling in this world is always a risk, and it's even in today's world, we're much better than we are, but we do things and we're tweaking things really still to this day to mitigate those risks or reduce our oversell risk.
Yeah.
But it starts with that buyer's remorse period, we were running all of our orders through even before the ERP system. We were effectively running them through when we were on Salesforce, taking that order on Salesforce, 45-minute delay, running them through our EDI system, and translating those or mapping them into a ERP application file. And then we had to worry about the rest of our B2B business, probably even more so than our e-commerce business. And those are, in our legacy ERP environment, those are long-running EDI jobs that are both taking care of inbound and outbound, and effectively are rather singular threaded. So we couldn't necessarily just kick off 2 or 3 sessions. It's very much a batch, or our world was batch oriented.
Yeah.
And that's when things work. So long story short, you're talking about a 4.5 to 6 hour delay before the ERP or the WMS sees the order. And that's when things work. And things don't always work. You have errors, problems, delays, so on and so forth.
So you mentioned the second thing, you talked about error handling. Back then, so we're still kind of before you made any decisions to move forward with anything, how were you kind of dealing with the error handling that was going to come up, and what were some of the business impacts as a result of that, either through personnel or canceled order or whatever that might be?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I'll try to answer it.
Answer the best you can. No worries.
Yeah. So we had some organizational things going on over the years where we basically moved the front of our office and our customer service department from Ohio to the Boston area, and quite a bit of turnover, and it wasn't necessarily managed perfectly. And so some of the newer folks within the organization that were in charge of a lot of master data weren't necessarily onboarded extremely well, which basically, unfortunately creates a lot of noise. And when you're dealing with exception management and errors and problems, the worst thing you can have is a lot of noise, because people tend to then ignore the noise to some degree, or just think that this is normal or this is okay.
Yeah, so, it's like we use the phrase of, it's kind of like trying to take a sip of water from a fire hose.
Yes.
Right. You, at a certain point in time, you just become numb to the whole thing, and then no error has any meaning to you.
Exactly. And we have, automated exception error handling emails and reports that are trying to alert people to real world problems or problems that need to be reacted to.
Yeah.
And to some degree, certain reports, certain exceptions became normal. And we almost had to go through a retraining, a refocus in regards to with the new organization, new customer service folks coming into the mix. We really had to focus them on these are not okay. It's not normal to have 50 to 75 to 100 line items on this exception report. We need to fix the root cause, and that's another thing. It's rather than barely forcing something through the system, in some sort of brute force way. We had to work with many of the business users and the key users and the super users to understand the issue at the heart of the issue, the root cause, which a lot of times is master data related. One good example of that is a SKU might be set up properly for the most part, to show up on a retailer's website, but maybe their cross-reference between their vendor item number and our item number is not properly defined in our ERP system. So we get the order, but
you recognize it.
We can't we can't map it to the proper product, or worse, map it to a different product and ship the wrong product to the consumer. So,
well, and then you get the customer service calls, and now that your people are in Boston and people are saying it's a car seat, and the Boston people is like, it's a car seat.
Yeah, that's true. True.
No, but I mean, in all seriousness, so the mapping of that data is it's something that we actually spend quite a bit of time talking about as well, because you've got sort of this master catalog, if you will, right? You're a brand, you're a well-known brand. You've got approved images, you've got approved descriptions and so forth, and you've got like this curated bit of content. But now every single channel that you're dealing with wants that content in a different format. They've got, this is known as taxonomies, right? They've got, maybe they allow a 45-digit description versus another site is 60 or 90 or whatever, and you've got different attribution and the way that they measure, these units of measures, inches, pounds, or is it, kilos or whatever, all that fun stuff. So can you talk about that a little bit in terms of kind of how you were dealing with the master data problem back then, that many-to-many problem, and then sort of how you started to shift your thinking towards moving in a better direction?
Yeah, I mean, some of that had to do with just getting more solid ownership within the business of the master data. As we started, we use a PIM system, a product information management system, called Salsify. And really, again, as our organizational changes are happening, that naturally got a little bit better over time. As the brand marketing and the product marketing organizations started to get their arms around the body of work. Our overall product master data set became more mature and more accurate. And then we took a lot of steps to better integrate that PIM system with both our ERP and our website. And really train the organization, if you will, to say that that our PIM system is our singular source system for our product master information. And that mindset was an important mindset. Is, we can't have ancillary websites or ancillary shared folders or SharePoint folders that maybe have product dimensions or product images or product descriptions or product copy. That all needs to be centrally located, and everyone needs to go to the same spot. Our product managers need to get our PIM system updated, and then we work with brand marketing to better integrate the PIM with the ERP, with our website, and now with Etail.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so just so everybody's aware, like the intent of this is not that Chip, as you picked up, is a customer details, but the intent here is not as a sales component. This is really what are the best practices here to look at. So as we think about, maybe let's talk about inventory management a little bit and inventory visibility. Mm-hmm. This is another area where we generally see a lot of challenges, right? And can you talk a little bit about kind of what your inventory footprint looked like geographically?
Yep.
And kind of how you were dealing with the availability question of, I'm selling in 15 to 20 different places, and how many do I tell the world I actually have then, and go from there?
Sure. And we're still working to, I would say, make our inventory position and our inventory strategy better. That is a focal point of our vice president of operations. We're looking at 3PL strategies. So this is I would call it a work in process, and will be probably for the next 12 months. But I'll talk a little bit about our situation and some of the challenges that we face. But basically, we have we have 3 primary ship points, potentially 2, depending upon how you want to look at it. But it's primarily a pretty simple model. We have a ship point within Ohio, which is our primary ship point, really for all of our SKUs that are manufactured in our primary manufacturing facility in Ohio. Those are primarily car seats, booster seats, and exercisers, that type of product. That Ohio facility also ships really to all of our Canadian retailers and our Canadian consumers. We only ship Canada out of our Ohio location. We have a West Coast near Los Angeles based third-party logistics partner. And then we have another ship point that's primarily focused on wood baby gates and pet gates in Southern California near San Diego. The 3PL in California is primarily shipping anything that is manufactured in our China manufacturing plants, Goodbaby and other third-party China manufacturing plants, as those products come over the water. However, and primarily anything that is shipped to a consumer in the D2C model is really, that SKU is either shipped primarily either from Ohio or from that 3PL in California. But we realize this model is problematic due to many times we're either directly paying for that shipping costs, or our retailer is paying for that shipping costs, and is going to basically drive our wholesale price down to cover that shipping cost of taking a pretty big box a car seat or a stroller and shipping it potentially across the country from either California to the East Coast or vice versa.
So let's drill in on that, and I'm going to say what you said in a slightly different fashion.
Sure.
Just to clarify the point, and then let's talk about it a little bit more. So effectively, you had two primary D2C shipping points, three, but two primary.
Yep.
And the inventory was one product only resided in one location. You weren't mixing. A single product did not have inventory in both locations at that point in time.
Generally speaking, the one exception to that was if it was a Canadian sold SKU, we would stock in Ohio.
Right. Yeah. So then the net effect is when the consumer, based on whatever site that order was taken on and whatever SLA is going to come along with that, based on that site and their relationship and or the shipping method, there's a strong possibility you may have to wrap that order in dollar bills to be able to get it in time.
Correct.
Yep, and which basically means expedited shipping. And I imagine that was a pretty expensive proposition for you guys.
Yeah, and typically, from our standpoint, it really meant just a not a great consumer experience.
Yeah,
is what it came down to. So there's only so many consumers and so many products that where a consumer would potentially wait 5, 6, 7 days to, or maybe even longer to get their order, to get the product.
So you again, I'm going to go on a slight tangent because you brought it up. I'm going to blame you. When you talk about that consumer experience, perhaps for some of the other brands, either watching today or on future calls or future recording of this, can you talk a little bit about kind of how you looked at that consumer experience from a delivery time frame and so forth? And did you have either any metrics you were looking at, or were there internal conversations about the importance of this? And it's like, how did you go from this is a problem, we sense it's a problem, to we know it's a problem and it's worth investing in to fix?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we had a lot of formalized metrics. I think everyone, well, it probably started out as people sensing it's a problem. The DSB business and even the e-commerce business initially wasn't a huge percentage of our business. It wasn't our focal point in our strategic conversations, but it was clearly at some point identified as our growth opportunity from a company perspective. And the way the industry was going, the way the world was going, we clearly identified, and the way we've struggled really for years to grow our top line, we knew that we needed to do two things. We needed to elevate our brand. We needed to get out of the low and mid price point products in this industry and develop more higher margin products. And when we did that, we needed to be able to launch those products in a direct e-commerce D2C environment. But in order to do that, we also need to be able to efficiently and quickly get the product to the consumer in a margin-friendly way.
So there's a point I want to double click on here. So what happens if that doesn't happen?
That being
from the consumer's perspective, if it doesn't get there in the time that they expect and so forth, what would Evenflo say is their expectation of if the consumer has a bad experience based upon that shipment, that either delayed shipment or canceled order or whatever that scenario is?
I think it comes down to just really a lot of unsatisfied consumers, and I guess in a worst case scenario, it's either a canceled order, or return shipment, or a refund. We're going to give you something else for free.
Yeah.
I've struggled sometimes to really understand the standard operating procedure of our consumer call center. I see a lot of in warranty replacement goods being shipped all the time for $0.
Yeah.
Or a lot of discounts being given, and over the years I've kind of asked pointed questions or challenged to say what's the SOP for that, and come to realize that generally speaking, our mindset, and it's probably the right mindset, is to keep that consumer happy.
Yeah.
Social media and everything else, we want to keep that. It's not about that one consumer. It's about the overall consumer base.
Yeah.
And, the ability to continue to elevate our brand, to keep up our reputation, and to sell to the next consumer, or that consumer's younger sibling, or that consumer's mom,
or that consumer when they have their next kid.
Correct.
Or that consumer when they're looking for a related product,
or if they're talking to their friends. Yes.
Yeah. So do you guys measure as a brand like the average number of Evenflo purchases during a customer lifetime?
We do. With the evolution of big data, we are starting to develop more and more of that data set.
Yeah.
We probably have a lot of room for improvement.
Sure.
In that area.
But it's,
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to pin you on anything. It's just more curious because I think, one of the things that people have to appreciate in terms of why this stuff is worth figuring out and really drilling into and investing in is when you talk about D2C being a huge growth area, it's expensive to drive traffic to a listing on a site. It's expensive to, there's a lot of money that's spent online trying to drive traffic for a particular product or a particular brand. Sure. Right. One of the most profitable ways to be able to drive sales is to get repeat business. But what's the number one thing that suffers when people have a bad experience? It's repeat business, right? So if you are a company that depends upon, a customer coming back 3 or 4 times in their lifespan, and then all of a sudden that average goes from maybe 3.2 down to 1.7 based upon a bad experience, and then the reviews that happen.
Right.
It's funny, as a team, we've been going through the Challenger customer, which is kind of a sales book, and they did some research and said that today in the online world, the average customer goes through 57% of their buying process before they ever contact the brand or whatever, right? Wow. So people are doing a lot of top of funnel research. Yes. And you mentioned it, you nailed it. Social media and reviews, when people have bad experiences, right, they're much more likely to talk about bad experiences than they are the positive experiences.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. So making sure that they have a positive experience is a really important thing. I do have a sense you and I could probably go all afternoon, but I want to make sure that we do leave some time for some questions. So if anybody on the call has questions, make sure you put them in the chat, and we'll try and get to a few of them here in the end. But I think I'm really enjoying the way this is going in terms of the discussion topics. So inventory management, you've got inventory in multiple places, right? You've got an external party, a third-party logistics provider who has their own WMS, yes, right? And they've got their own, so back to the cycle time thing, right? You've got another party with another system that's in the mix with cycle times. You have to know what inventory they have and what inventory is available versus what's allocated. And then you're going to turn around and you're going to publish that to 15 to 20 different sites.
Correct.
So sort of before you made any major decisions, how did you deal with that problem, and or maybe what were the early signs that you saw of we need a better mousetrap?
Yeah, I would say I don't think we dealt with the problem very well. We probably dealt with it via maybe overcompensation, we potentially went back and forth to potentially just adding buffers in our I would say inventory allocation formula that was really based in our ERP, where we basically did not want to oversell, and so we would protect and reduce our available quantities to our DSV partners.
Okay.
However, again, double-edged sword, when we did that, people would ask sometimes, why isn't this showing up? We're running a promotion at Amazon or at back in the day, Babies R Us, and it's not showing up on the website. Why not? Well, we have this buffer, because the buffer is, we were limited in our capabilities in our legacy ERP system. We had an overall buffer by retailer, and we struggled with that to some degree. So that was one method we dealt with that in regards to just protecting ourselves from overselling.
Right. So you're dealing with all these different symptoms, and you make a decision to start kind of putting your toe in the water in terms of starting to look at different ways of handling these problems.
Right.
If you were to kind of try and collate the issues into like primary symptoms and or problems to solve, like what kind of really came to mind in terms of like, we have to nail X, Y, and Z, or however long that list is, when you were looking out on the market and trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to scale this thing in a stable way? What are the big issues that came to mind for you?
Yeah, there's several, and I'm thinking back in my memory banks. One is we wanted a modern order management system that played well, specifically in the e-commerce world, in the direct-to-consumer world, that really specialized in that, not only from an order management perspective and an inventory management perspective, but probably from I would say, a catalog management or portfolio management perspective. We wanted a system and a partner that has kind of been there, done that, and done it well. Was a focal point for ours. We wanted an ability for our digital team, our digital consumer team, to really go into one system, one place, look at our Revolve Onyx black car seat, and be able to see, where is it being sold on the internet? Where is it being sold? What is being sold at? What prices it was being sold at? What the volume was? How it was doing? So on and so forth. So that was an important point for us. We wanted a system that could take us to the next level in regards to order routing or dynamic order routing. So again, we wanted to get out of the always shipping our China-based manufactured goods from California to every consumer basically in the US, or Ohio-based manufactured goods to every consumer in the US. But we wanted to do that in a careful way. Right. We can't necessarily, because of the size of our product, we can't necessarily stock hundreds of SKUs, especially the lower volume SKUs. We have limited capacity at our 3PL in California. So we needed a system to be able to know when the 3PL potentially is out of inventory and maybe Ohio is not. And okay, now we got to route the order back to Ohio. But when California does have the product in stock, and that consumer is on the western side of the United States, and we are paying for the freight, let's route that order to California. So those are some of the key kind of, like I would call it, say, functional needs that we have. Maybe some of those are technical also. But we really wanted to get comfortable with a partner and a system that where we mattered to them, and we weren't just because again, our e-commerce business is not in the billions. When we talk to some of the bigger players, one comes to mind, Channel Advisor. I don't know that we were going to be very much on their radar for being a strategic partner of theirs.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so I think, okay, question. That's a good one. So having gone through this D2C transition, what's been the biggest surprise or issue for you?
Good question.
Knowing that this is an evolution, right? And I would say anybody expecting to ever go through this and be quote unquote done's not a thing, right? This is a constant iteration and evolution as channels change and all that stuff. But what's been one of the biggest surprises for you?
Yeah, and you might have just indirectly answered it for me.
Oh,
it's
sorry.
probably that's okay. It's probably the fact that not every day, but maybe every week, we probably learn something new that we could be doing better, that we never even realized was happening. To some degree, sometimes it surprises me that maybe someone in our call center, someone in our distribution center is dealing with some sort of significant inefficiency or problem or repetitive issue over and over again every day, and probably not raising their hand or yelling loud enough that they just kind of deal with it. The fact that, to your point, you're never done. There's always room for improvement, and it's just, again, it's high volume, it's lots of potential touch points, and it's a challenge every day, every week. Mm-hmm. So probably just the fact that it's taken us longer than I thought it would to improve or reach a level of SLAs that we really want to get to.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Just a reminder here, we've got just a couple minutes left. If you have questions, throw them in here. Another question just came up. What advice would you give other brands who are looking to go to D2C?
I would say take your time on due diligence as far as your decisions and who you work with from a partnership system perspective. Michael knows. We've known each other for a few years. We kicked the tires many a times on doing this or not doing this. What was the right timing for us? We probably looked at 6 or 7 different players in the market. And when we made a decision that we wanted to do this, but even once we said we wanted to invest, it probably took us 4 to 5 months to make a decision. And I think it was time well spent.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm really glad you brought that up, Chip, because on the vendor side, you always want those decisions to go fast, right? But one of the things that you did that I was very appreciative of, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, is you had a lot of competing interests from within the organization in terms of people wanting different things and making different statements about what success meant and what the goal was and what we were trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And when you got heavily involved in the process, one of the things you did was you put the brakes on and you rallied your executive team. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what that was like and why you did that and sort of the output and how that kind of helped the process for you?
Sure. We had a couple changes in leadership. So that was an important thing, I think, from my standpoint, to get our CFO, new CFO involved. It's probably my natural modus of operation is, there had been for on and off for probably a couple of years. We had what I would deem surface level conversations and surface level discussions on potentially doing something like this, but it wasn't, in my mind, a very scientific or objective approach, and really really just needed to pick the brain of various folks mostly in our commercial side of the business on what their challenges were, because I don't know that at that point my organization or myself really had a solid understanding of some of their headaches, heartburns, and some of the things that were impeding them from growing the business. And so I think it was just a natural learning and discussion to understand the requirements, understand the challenges, get closer to that front side of the business, the commercial side of the business, the digital folks, to gain an understanding of their world. And that really helped us in a more kind of objective, detailed search for a tool or a set of tools that would really help out the business.
Yeah, and in your position, I mean, and I think this is the case in a lot of different brands. You've got all these different business unit managers or directors or VPs or whatever, and they've got their own objectives. And
sure.
And oftentimes then the IT group gets brought in and they're already tasked with, hey, solve this, or we need this. And sometimes they understand the problem, sometimes they don't. And I sense that you oftentimes get pulled into the solving of the problem, even though they think they may know what they need, they oftentimes may not, some more than others, right?
Yeah, many times I get told, okay, that I need, here's the answer, please go do this. And
yeah,
I ask, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? So
yep, yeah, that sounds familiar. My partner and our CTO oftentimes, you know, in the early days would have to come back and say, Michael, don't tell me how to do it, just tell me what the problem is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point, right?
Yep, exactly. So in rallying the team, did you find that there was benefit of that group themselves kind of hearing each other, what the issues were, really kind of coalescing around, okay, yeah, this is a bigger ball of wax, or
absolutely,
with yarn, or whatever your analogy is?
Not only that, but the relationship building that happens during those discussions is very valuable. And when sometimes they forget what the problem is, because they've been through it maybe for months or sometimes years, and they drew a conclusion a while back that this is the answer to the problem.
Yeah.
And you, in my mind, you ask some questions, you ask some open-ended questions or some pointed questions, and you get to really think through that. And maybe that dialogue to some degree, gets them to open up their mindset in regards to the possibilities.
Yeah. Man, this was an awesome hour of time. I suspect, like I said, you and I can go on and on, and we may have to have you come and make a repeat appearance here at some point in time. This was a great discussion. Really, thank you for taking the time with us here today. Let me see. I want to just a couple of quick things here. There we go. Share screen. So I guess I would just wrap up by saying, anybody watching this either now or later, if you've got additional questions on this or really want to deep dive on this, you probably can find either Chip or I on LinkedIn, or feel free to reach out to anybody at Etail Solutions. Happy to have conversations at any point in time. No pressure, no BS. Just let's see if we can solve some problems. If not, maybe there's somebody we know that we can point you in the right direction for. So feel free to do that. We do have a sort of a follow-up piece here that'll be sent out to everybody who attended, and also is available on our website around the 7 steps to scale D2C fulfillment. Also, don't forget next month, again, we've got Steve Ballard with Project Vert, but really 33 years of experience in operations and logistics. And he's really going to sort of digest the specific problem around what successful D2C brands need to do to expand fulfillment without losing control. And then I guess last thing would be at the very end here, when you close your Zoom session, there's going to be a survey, a 3-question survey that's going to pop up. We'd love to get that feedback from you. So if you don't mind just taking a couple minutes and completing that, that would be wonderful. Chip, it's been a pleasure here today. Thank you so much again for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Hopefully we'll see you next month.